God bless you. It's my honor to be with you again and to share with you the next in a series of messages on saying yes to God. Today we're going to focus on King David. When did David start saying yes to God? Well, we don't really know for sure, but Psalm 78, verse 70 through 71, it says, God chose David his servant and took him from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep he brought him to be the shepherd of his people Jacob, of Israel his inheritance. We don't know for sure when David started saying yes to God, but God surely brought David from the pasture to the palace. But Psalm 78 doesn't mention how long it took for God to bring David from being a shepherd to sitting on the throne of Israel. And we know that it took quite a while. In between the pasture and the palace, there were years of strife, fear, loneliness, years when David's companionship with God was severely tested. David was anointed to be the next king while Saul was still the king. And this didn't work well for David. David was a great success. As a matter of fact, 1 Samuel 18:14 says, in everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. But then somewhere along the way, the bottom fell out. Everything changed. Trouble and heartache came like a flood into David's life. He lost his home. He lost his wife, his friends. He was forced to live on the run like a criminal, hiding out in the wilderness. And for the next 10 years, David ran for his life because Saul wanted to kill him. I can imagine there must have been times when David thought, look what happens when you say yes to God. I certainly was happier as a shepherd. Well, in 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 1, it says, David escaped to the cave of Adullam. And the cave of Adullam was a symbol of rejection. There was no other safe place for David to go. It was as if his back was against the wall and the cave had become like a prison for David. And inside the cave, disconnected from all others, David learned to pray and to connect with God and say yes to God all over again. Through his suffering, rejection, and loneliness, God was able to dig the well of David's soul a little deeper and a little wider. Being abandoned by others, it can be a blessing if that's what it takes to drive us to God. It was in the cave of Adullam that David penned the words of Psalm 142. Here's what he wrote in Psalm 142, verses 1 and 2. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord of mercy. I pour out my complaint before him. Before him, I tell him my trouble. There wasn't anything that David withheld. He poured out everything that was troubling his spirit to God. And when we feel trapped by our circumstances or enemies, it is only God who can deliver us and to keep us safe. Listen as David continues in Psalm 142 in verses 3 and 4. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watches over my way. In the path where I walk, men have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. Who cares for my life? And God knew all about David's feelings of defeat. And maybe years earlier, David thought, I'm ready for the throne right now. But it was the Lord who allowed these things to happen in David's life for his spiritual growth. In that cave, David died to all others and became tied to God alone. He was connected to God as never before. David cried out in Psalm 142, verse 6 and 7. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. No matter where we are, no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, when we turn to God and say yes to Him, He's able to set us free. He's able to change our circumstances, and God is more interested than our circumstances than in changing us. He will resurrect what is dead. He will surround us with good things. And not only was God working in David's heart, but God was working outside that cave. God surprises David. And David looked outside the cave and he saw hundreds of men that the Lord had brought there. He saw his father, he saw his brothers, and all of them came there to lift David up as their king. I close with this. It's easy to say yes to God when we're enjoying all of the honors, all of the acclaim that's rolling in towards us. But it is something else to speak of friendship with God in the time of loneliness and hardship. In David's case, the love bond between he and God grew even stronger. If he loved God before, he adored God now. If he leaned on God's strength before, now he rested completely in God. When David could no longer depend on friends, popularity, or his own gifts or skills, David discovered that there was nothing left to hang on to but God. And David did that with all of his might. Could it be that your own walk with God has reached a point where you need to surrender your will to His will all over again? Do you need to say yes again to His purposes for your life? Perhaps you've been resisting God or even neglecting Him. David's years as a fugitive are what brought him to the end of himself. And when he reached the limits of his endurance, that's when David found the strength and the presence of God far beyond anything he had ever experienced before. He began to find himself and the endless resources of God to be all that he needed to be as the king of Israel. Will you surrender everything before the Lord? Will you offer God everything that you're holding on to and that may be holding you back? When you release everything to Him, you will receive more of Him than you can contain, and all that you need to be victorious. It's been my honor to be with you again today. May the Lord richly bless you. Amen and amen.